A four-man biker gang made Bruce Lee eat off the floor. Then the jukebox died. The bikers boot-pinned Bruce Lee's chopsticks to the floor like a nail. Then the man smiled and said, "Pick it up with your mouth." The room laughed once, too loud, too nervous. Bruce didn't laugh back. He just looked up, and the exit quietly disappeared behind leather backs. Bruce had walked in for 10 minutes, one drink, one quick meeting, then gone. That was the plan. The roadhouse sat off a dark stretch of highway where the neon sign buzzed like it hated being alive. Inside, it was loud enough to hide anything. Pool balls cracking, glasses clinking, a jukebox chewing through a rock song like it owned the place. He took 2 steps toward the bar and felt the first shove. Not a hard hit, more like a statement. A shoulder slid into his ribs, casual, practiced, like the guy did it to strangers all day just to watch them apologize. Bruce steadied without spilling. He didn't look angry. He didn't even look surprised. He turned slightly, eyes calm, and saw them. 4 men, not a crowd. Worse, a unit. Leather vests, heavy boots, rings that looked like they'd been worn into knuckles. Their hair was long, their smiles short. The one who'd bumped him was broad and pink-faced, with a grin that said he'd already decided what this was going to be. "Didn't see you there," the biker said, not moving out of the way. Bruce shifted to pass. The biker mirrored him, blocking again. Close enough now that Bruce could smell gasoline and beer and the sour heat of someone who liked corners. The biker's hand landed on Bruce's chest, flat palm, like he was checking if Bruce was real. "Where you headed?" he asked. Bruce's voice stayed low. "To the bar." The biker nodded slowly, as if considering whether that was allowed. Then he glanced over Bruce's shoulder, and the other 3 moved. Not fast, not dramatic. Just placed themselves, one near the door, one near the pool tables. One behind Bruce, close enough that Bruce felt the shift of air when he breathed, a trap built out of bodies and timing. The biker in front leaned in. "You talk like you're somebody." Bruce didn't step back. He also didn't step forward. He simply held his ground, relaxed. That irritated the biker more than fear would have. A waitress slid by carrying a plate piled with greasy food, chop suey maybe, or noodles, something cheap meant to soak up liquor. The biker reached out without looking and hooked a finger under the edge of the plate as she passed. The plate tipped. Food hit the floor with a wet slap. Sauce splattered across Bruce's shoes. The waitress froze, eyes wide, because she knew exactly what just happened and exactly what she was supposed to do next, pretend it was her fault. "Oh, damn," the biker said, smiling at her like she was a dog that had dropped a trick. "Clumsy." "I'm sorry," she started, but the words came out thin. The biker didn't even look at her anymore. He looked down at the mess, then up at Bruce. And that's when the room started paying attention. Not the whole place, just the people who had learned to read danger before it got loud. A man at the bar stopped mid-sip. A couple in a corner went quiet. Even the pool game stalled, cue held in the air, as if the table itself was listening. Bruce glanced down at the sauce spreading. He could feel the eyes on him. The biker wanted something specific. A flinch, a plea, a laugh, a little surrender. Any sign Bruce was going to play the role they'd written for him. Bruce didn't give it. He simply lifted his foot a half inch, wiped a dot of sauce off the leather with the edge of his pant leg, and looked back up. The biker's grin tightened. "Look at that," he said to the room, louder now. "He's got manners." One of the other bikers chuckled and stepped closer, just enough to narrow Bruce's space. He had a thin mustache and dead eyes. His hand brushed Bruce's elbow as if accidentally testing the joint. "Hey," Mustache said. "That you? From TV?" Bruce didn't answer. The leader, because it was obvious now who the leader was, tilted his head. He wasn't the biggest. He didn't need to be. He had a calm cruelty, the kind that made other men perform for him. He crouched slightly, picked up a pair of chopsticks from the spilled food, and held them out like a joke offering. Then he let them drop. Right in front of Bruce's toes. The chopsticks rolled, one tapping Bruce's boot. The leader lifted his boot and pressed down on them, pinning them to the sticky floor. "Pick it up," he said. Bruce held his gaze. The leader smiled wider. No, not with your hands." He glanced around at his boys like a director checking the lights. Then he leaned closer, voice thick with amusement. "With your mouth." A laugh burst from somewhere too fast, then died awkwardly when nobody joined in. The air changed. People realized this wasn't teasing. This wasn't bar humor. This was a public stripping. Bruce breathed once, slow. He could walk away. That was the simplest option. But the door wasn't a door anymore. It was a wall guarded by the biggest biker, who stood there with his arms crossed, smiling like he'd been waiting for this exact moment. Bruce shifted his weight slightly, angling his body not toward the leader, not toward the door, but toward open space. A tiny move most people wouldn't notice. The leader noticed. "Ah," he said, soft. "You thinking?" He straightened, and the softness vanished. He snapped 2 fingers. Mustache reached out and grabbed Bruce's shoulder, hard, not a friendly grip. Fingers dug into muscle like hooks. Another biker moved to Bruce's other side and boxed him in. Their bodies didn't slam into him yet. They didn't need to. They just made sure Bruce understood. You don't leave unless we let you leave. The bartender took 1 step forward, rag in hand, trying to pretend he was just cleaning. "Guys," the bartender said carefully, voice flat, "don't start this in here." The leader didn't even turn his head. He lifted 1 hand, and the big biker at the door, silent until now, walked over like a shadow. He got close to the bartender and leaned in. The bartender stopped moving. His eyes flicked to the door, then back, then down. He backed away without another word. That's when the room fully understood the rule. Nobody was coming to help. The leader nodded at Bruce's shoes. "You spilled our food." Bruce looked down at the floor again. Sauce, noodles, chopsticks pinned under a boot. He looked up. "I didn't spill it," he said. It wasn't loud. It wasn't defiant. It was just true. The leader's smile dropped, like a mask sliding off. For a second, his eyes flashed, hot, sudden. Then he smiled again, too controlled. "Oh," he said. He talks back. He turned to the room, raising his voice like he was hosting. "Ladies and gentlemen, we got ourselves a teacher in here." A few people stared at their drinks. Someone whispered, "Don't look." Someone else shifted in their seat like they might stand, then didn't. The leader stepped closer until his belt buckle almost touched Bruce's thigh. He spoke quietly now, so only Bruce could hear. "You're going to do it," he said, "and you're going to do it slow, because I want to see your face when you understand where you are." He lifted his boot off the chopsticks. Then, sharp and deliberate, he kicked the chopsticks forward. They slid under Bruce's foot, and before Bruce could lift his shoe, the leader's boot came down again, this time on Bruce's toe. Not enough to break it, enough to make the pain bloom hot and immediate. Bruce's jaw tightened just once. The leader saw it and smiled like he'd finally found the button. "That's it," he whispered. "There you are." Mustache tightened his grip on Bruce's shoulder and pulled him half a step forward, toward the food on the floor. The leader lowered his face close to Bruce's ear. "On your knees," he said. And for the first time since Bruce walked in, the jukebox song hit a chorus, loud, triumphant, like the bar itself was cheering the wrong side. Bruce didn't move yet, but the space around him got smaller, and everyone watching could feel it. Whatever happened next, it was going to happen right here, in front of all of them. Mustache yanked Bruce down before the decision could look like his. Not a full collapse, just a forced bend at the knees, a sharp tug on the shoulder that made Bruce's balance change for a fraction of a second. The leader watched that fraction like it was blood in the water. "Slow," the leader said, voice carrying now. "Nice and slow." Bruce felt the boot still pressing his toe. Pain, controlled. He could move. He could explode out of this. He could end it in a blink. But there were 4 of them, and behind them, an entire room that had learned to survive by not becoming involved. If Bruce moved too early, the wrong person would get hurt. The waitress, the bartender, some drunk kid at the pool table who thought courage was a posture. So Bruce did something that made the bikers lean forward in hungry satisfaction. He lowered. 1 knee touched the sticky floor. A few people winced like they'd been slapped. The leader laughed once, short and loud, then pointed down at the spilled food like it was a stage marker. "That's it," he said. "Now show everybody." Mustache's hand tightened on Bruce's shoulder, pushing his head lower. Another biker, thin with a shaved head, stepped in and hooked his fingers under Bruce's chin, forcing his face toward the mess. "Open," Shaved Head muttered, like he was feeding an animal. Bruce's eyes flicked up, not fear, not rage, just calculation. He could hear the pool balls again. One of the players, a teen with a denim jacket, hit a shot too hard by mistake. The crack sounded like a gun in the sudden tension. Everyone flinched. The teen froze, cue in hand, realizing he'd made noise at the wrong time. The leader snapped his head toward the pool table. Just a glance. The big biker by the door started walking in that direction. The teen backed up, hands rising instinctively. "Sorry, man, just—" The big biker didn't answer. He just put a hand on the teen's chest and shoved him backward into the edge of the pool table. Hard. The teen's hips hit wood. Cue clattered to the floor. Silence returned, thicker. The message was clear. Even breathing wrong was punishable tonight. The leader turned back to Bruce, satisfied, like he'd tightened a collar. "See," he said, "everybody behaves when I say." He crouched, picked up a noodle with 2 fingers, and dropped it right in front of Bruce's mouth. A disgusting, intimate gesture. Then he raised his eyebrows, waiting for the moment Bruce's pride cracked. Bruce did not crack. He leaned forward, controlled, calm, and took the noodle between his teeth. No theatrics, no hesitation. He bit, then swallowed. The room made a sound, tiny, involuntary, like a collective stomach turning. The leader's smile widened into something uglier. "Oh, look at that," he said. "He's trained." Mustache gave a little shove like a reward. Good boy. That was the next step. Not just humiliation. Ownership. The waitress stood frozen near the bar, tray still in hand. Her eyes were wet, but she didn't wipe them. Wiping would be movement. Movement could be noticed. The bartender, jaw clenched, took another step forward again, because he couldn't not. He didn't have the luxury of spectatorship. This was his place. "Enough," the bartender said, voice strained. "You proved your point. Let him up." The leader didn't stand. He stayed crouched, looking at Bruce like Bruce was furniture. Then he called out without turning, "Ray." The big biker by the pool table stopped and looked over. The leader nodded toward the bartender. Ray walked back slowly, boots heavy like he enjoyed making the floor listen. He came up behind the bartender and put a hand on the bartender's shoulder. Not violent yet, just a claim. The bartender stiffened. "Don't." Ray leaned into his ear and whispered something. Nobody heard the words, but everyone saw the bartender's throat move as he swallowed. Ray's hand tightened. The bartender's knees bent a fraction involuntarily. Ray guided him like a dog on a leash, 2 steps to the side and slammed him forward into the bar. Not full force, but enough to bounce his forehead off wood. Enough to put a sound in the room people would remember. The bartender grunted, palms catching himself, eyes squeezed shut. The leader's voice stayed cheerful. "Anybody else?" No one spoke. The leader rose. He dusted his hands like he'd finished a job. Then he leaned down again, close to Bruce. "That's what happens when people forget this is my night." He took a step back, giving Bruce an inch of air, then took it away again by motioning. Mustache hauled Bruce up by the collar, halfway to standing, then shoved him down again on both knees. A jerk so sudden Bruce's hands hit the floor to keep from face-planting in the sauce. Laughter exploded from Shaved Head. "Careful," Shaved Head mocked. "Kung Fu Man might slip." The leader smiled, but his eyes had changed. He wasn't just enjoying this anymore. Something had started to itch inside him, because Bruce wasn't giving him what he wanted. Bruce wasn't begging. Bruce wasn't pleading. Bruce wasn't crying. Bruce wasn't even angry. He was quiet. And quiet men make bullies feel stupid. The leader leaned in, voice low, sharp. "Say it." Bruce looked up. "Say what?" he asked. The leader's face twitched. "Say you're sorry," he said. "Say you're grateful we didn't stomp you the second you walked in. Say you're going to remember this." Bruce held his gaze. "I'm not sorry." The leader's smile vanished fully now. For a moment the whole room felt that shift, like a blade sliding out of a sheath. The leader straightened and slapped Bruce across the face. Not a wild swing. A flat-palmed snap that cracked through the bar louder than the music. Bruce's head turned slightly. His cheek reddened. He stayed on his knees. The leader pointed at him like he was announcing a verdict. "He thinks he's tougher than us." Mustache grabbed Bruce's hair and jerked his head back so everyone could see his face. It wasn't panic they saw. It was control. That control made the leader's temper flare. His eyes went from amusement to rage in a single beat. "Fine," the leader said. "We do it different." He looked at the jukebox, then at his boys. Bring him. Mustache and Shaved Head each took an arm and hauled Bruce off his knees. Bruce resisted just enough to stay balanced, not enough to escalate. Their grips were hard, fingers digging into tendon. They dragged him across the floor, shoes skidding in spilled sauce. People slid out of the way like furniture being moved. The jukebox sat against the far wall, lights pulsing, playing the same song like it had no idea it was about to become part of a nightmare. They shoved Bruce into the wall beside it. Hard. His shoulder hit wood. The machine rattled. The song stuttered for half a beat, then kept playing. The leader stepped in close, pinning Bruce with his own body, forearm across Bruce's chest. "You like being quiet," the leader whispered. "I'll make you perform." He turned his head slightly, eyes scanning the room. "Everybody watch." Then he did the next thing, small, quick, cruel. He reached into his vest and produced a folded bill. He rubbed it between his fingers like bait. "Dance," he said, "or eat again. Your choice." Bruce didn't look at the money. His eyes went to the door. Ray was there again, back in position, blocking it like a wall. Bruce looked at the bartender, still hunched, hand pressed to his forehead. And Bruce understood. This wasn't a moment anymore. It was a cage. The leader smiled, reading the realization on Bruce's face for the first time. "That's right," he murmured. "Now you get it." And then, without warning, Shaved Head swung a pool cue from behind like a test, the tip whistling toward Bruce's ribs just to see if the kung fu guy would flinch. The cue stopped a hair from impact, because Bruce's hand shot up and caught it, not with a grab, with a clamp. Wood creaked under his fingers. The room went silent so fast the music suddenly felt too loud. The leader's smile froze, halfway between satisfaction and fear. Bruce didn't twist the cue, didn't strike, didn't explode. He just held it there, steady, like he was deciding if the night was about to end. Bruce held the pool cue still, one hand clamped around it like a vice. The biker on the other end tried to yank it back, once, then realized he couldn't. Not because Bruce was bigger, because Bruce was anchored, balanced, and completely unwilling to be moved. The leader stared at Bruce's hand like it had insulted him. Then he smiled again, too quick, too forced, and patted Bruce's cheek as if Bruce were a pet that had just learned a trick. "There it is," the leader said loudly. "He's got reflexes." He leaned toward his boys without taking his eyes off Bruce. "Don't break the toy yet." That word, toy, was the next step of the trap. If they admitted Bruce was dangerous, they'd have to stop. If they called him a toy, they could keep going while pretending they were still in control. Shaved Head tugged the cue harder, face red. Bruce didn't yank back. He just rotated his wrist a fraction, guiding the cue's tip down toward the floor. A soft, controlled disarm, barely visible. Shaved Head stumbled forward half a step as his leverage vanished. It wasn't dramatic. That was the point. It made him look stupid in front of the room. And stupid is what turns bullies into animals. Shaved Head's face flashed from laughter to rage in a blink. He lifted his free hand like he was going to slap Bruce across the mouth. Bruce didn't flinch. The leader snapped, "No!" Shaved Head froze mid-swing, hand hovering inches from Bruce's face. The leader stepped in, voice quiet but deadly. "I said don't break the toy." Shaved Head's jaw worked. He swallowed his pride and lowered his hand, but his eyes didn't leave Bruce. They promised something. The leader turned back to Bruce and made a show of thinking. "Okay," he said, "new game." He pointed at the spilled sauce still smeared across Bruce's shoes and trouser cuff. "You're going to clean that." Bruce said nothing. The leader's smile tightened. "With your tongue." A few people in the room shifted. Someone at the bar muttered, "Jesus." A chair scraped, then stopped, as if whoever moved it thought better of making sound. The leader heard everything. He turned his head slowly, scanning faces like he was memorizing who might become a problem. Ray, by the door, cracked his knuckles. Loud. The room went still again. The leader looked back at Bruce. "You don't like that?" he asked, almost conversational. "Then you'll do the other thing." He raised the folded bill again and held it out in front of Bruce's face like a prize. "Dance," he said, "right here, in front of everybody, and you do it good." Bruce's eyes flicked to the bill, then away. The leader's voice hardened. "You think you're above us." Mustache moved behind Bruce and hooked an arm around his chest from the back, not quite a choke. just enough pressure to make breathing require permission. Shaved Head stepped close again and pressed the tip of the pool cue lightly into Bruce's lower ribs. Not a strike. A warning line drawn on flesh. Bruce felt the cue's point, felt Mustache's forearm squeezing, felt the leader's breath close, and felt something else, the room's attention, like weight. The leader leaned in. "I want your face down again," he whispered. "I want you to understand I can make you do anything." Bruce breathed once, shallow. Then he spoke, quiet enough only the leader heard. "You can make me kneel," Bruce said. "You can't make me afraid." The leader's smile shattered. His hand snapped out and grabbed Bruce's throat, fingers digging just under the jawline, not choking him fully, just enough to lift Bruce's chin, to tilt his face toward the neon glow and show the room he owned it. "You hear that?" the leader barked to everyone. "He's brave." Ray laughed from the door, a harsh sound. "Let him be brave with no air." The leader squeezed harder. Bruce's hands rose, not to strike, but to peel the fingers off his throat. He did it slowly, like he was removing hooks from cloth. The leader felt that control, and it scared him. His eyes flicked, panic for a split second, then fury came rushing in to cover it. He shoved Bruce backward into the jukebox. The machine rattled again. The song skipped a beat, caught itself, kept playing. The leader slammed his palm on the jukebox glass. "You hear me?" he shouted over the music. "This is my bar." He wasn't talking to Bruce anymore. He was talking to the room, trying to reassert the physics he believed in. Size equals power, noise equals authority. Bruce's gaze slid to the bartender. The bartender had blood on his forehead now, a small line trailing into his eyebrow. He looked like he wanted to move, but his body wouldn't obey. The waitress stood near the bar, frozen. Her tray trembled in her hands. And then the leader did the thing that made the room's stomach drop. He reached over and snatched the waitress's wrist as she tried to back away. She gasped and stumbled forward, tray tilting. "Hey," she whispered. The leader yanked her closer, pulling her into the tight circle like a shield. "See?" he said. "Nobody leaves." He looked at Bruce, eyes bright with a mean idea. "You want to protect people, right? That's what you kung fu guys do?" He shoved the waitress lightly toward Bruce's chest. Mustache tightened his arm around Bruce's ribs again, pinning him in place so he couldn't step forward cleanly. The leader leaned close to the waitress's ear, then spoke so everyone heard. "If he moves wrong, you hit the floor. That's the rule." The waitress's eyes went wide. She shook her head slightly, terrified. Bruce's jaw set, just once. The leader saw it and grinned. That was the payoff he'd been chasing. Emotion, reaction, proof that Bruce could be pulled. "Good," the leader whispered. "Now you care." He stepped back a half step, keeping hold of the waitress's wrist with 2 fingers like she was nothing. Then he gestured at Shaved Head. "Hit him," he said casually. "Not hard, just enough." Shaved Head's face lit up. He raised the pool cue again, not a full swing this time. A short jab aimed at Bruce's stomach, quick and dirty. Bruce shifted his hips a fraction. The cue jabbed in, and Bruce's hand snapped down and trapped it against his own thigh, pinning the wood in place like a lever caught in a door. A tiny move, precise, humiliating. Shaved Head yanked again. Nothing. Bruce's eyes stayed on the leader. The leader's grin faltered, not because Bruce was winning, because Bruce was showing the room that the gang's rules were fake, that their control was performative, that their intimidation only worked if everyone agreed to be intimidated. So the leader changed the rules. A sharp turn, no warning. He released the waitress and clapped his hands once. Ray moved off the door immediately, straight toward the bar's phone behind the counter. He reached over the bartender's shoulder and tore the phone cord out of the wall like he was pulling a weed. The bartender flinched. "What the hell?" Ray slammed the receiver down hard enough to crack plastic. The leader spread his arms. "No calls." He nodded toward the side hallway leading to the bathrooms and the back exit. "No back door either." Mustache barked a laugh and pointed with his chin. 2 more men, people who hadn't been in the 4 at first, stood up from a booth. Friends, prospects, quiet muscle that had been sitting there like a reserve tank. They walked to the hallway and blocked it. Now it wasn't 4, it was a pack. And the room realized the trap wasn't just around Bruce, it was around everyone. The leader stepped close again, lowering his voice like he was sharing a secret. "You see how easy this is?" he said. "Nobody's coming." He tapped Bruce's chest with 2 fingers. "Now you do what I say." Bruce's eyes moved, once, toward the jukebox, toward the glass, toward the spinning record mechanism inside. The leader followed that look and laughed. "Oh, you think the music's gonna save you?" He leaned in. "Dance, or we start breaking people." Bruce stared at him. Then, very softly, Bruce said, "Let her go." The leader blinked. "Who?" Bruce's gaze flicked to the waitress. The leader smiled. "Or what?" Bruce didn't answer with words. He answered by shifting his feet, just a half step, finding balance under pressure, setting his hips like a door bolt sliding into place. The leader's expression changed in a microsecond. He saw it, he felt it, and he made the worst possible choice. He lunged forward to grab Bruce's throat again, fast, angry. But this time, Bruce didn't let the hand land. Bruce intercepted it. His forearm snapped up, not swinging, cutting the space. The leader's wrist got caught, redirected, and pinned against the jukebox frame so sharply the leader's face twisted in sudden pain. A sound escaped him, more surprise than agony. The room sucked in air. Bruce was still not attacking. He was demonstrating control, and control is the one thing the leader couldn't allow in front of his men. So he snarled, yanked back, and shouted one word that turned everything into a countdown. "Break him! Break him!" The word hit the room like a glass thrown at a wall. For half a heartbeat, nobody moved, because everyone's body was still catching up to the fact that the leader's wrist had just been pinned like it belonged to someone else. Then the pack surged. Shaved Head swung the pool cue sideways, not aiming for technique, aiming for damage. A bat swing meant to crack ribs. Bruce released the leader's wrist and slid offline a fraction, letting the cue whistle past where his torso had been. But Mustache was already behind him. Mustache's forearm snapped up across Bruce's throat, this time a real choke. Tight, ugly, the kind that doesn't care about winning, only about proving a point. Bruce felt his airway narrow, felt his spine press into the jukebox frame. The jukebox song blared in his ear, too loud, too bright, like a lie. Bruce's left hand hooked Mustache's elbow, not pulling it away, locking it. His right hand slid down Mustache's forearm and pressed at a point that made Mustache's grip glitch, not release, just stutter. Enough. Bruce dropped his weight suddenly. Mustache's choke lost leverage. Mustache stumbled forward half a step, dragged down by his own momentum. Bruce pivoted under the arm and drove a short, sharp strike into Mustache's ribs. Tight, compact, no windup. Mustache's breath left him in a choking bark. He bent over, not knocked out. Worse, disabled. Shaved Head recovered and jabbed the cue forward again, angry now, aiming for Bruce's face. Bruce caught the cue with both hands, twisted it down, and the wood cracked against the jukebox edge with a loud snap. Half the cue splintered free and clattered to the floor. Shaved Head blinked like he couldn't understand how his weapon had become trash. Then Ray hit. A full shove from the side, 200+ pounds of leather and spite, driving Bruce into the wall hard enough to make the jukebox rattle violently. The song skipped. The machine's lights flickered. The entire room froze for a second at that flicker, like the building itself had flinched. Ray didn't stop. He grabbed Bruce's jacket with both fists and slammed him again, shoulder first, trying to pin him. Bruce felt the impact through bone, felt the pressure of Ray's forearms grinding him into the corner. The leader, wrist still aching, stepped in with a grin that wasn't a grin anymore. He wasn't laughing now. He was trying to erase what the room had just seen. He reached behind his back and pulled a chain from his belt loop, thick metal links that clinked like teeth. He wrapped it once around his fist, staring at Bruce like he was about to write a lesson in blood. "Now," the leader whispered, "you're gonna learn." Bruce's eyes flicked past them, just once, taking inventory. The bartender hunched behind the bar, one hand gripping the counter edge like it was the only thing keeping him upright. The waitress stood rigid, face pale, trapped near the wall, her wrist red where she'd been grabbed. 2 prospects blocked the hallway, arms crossed, enjoying the show. And in the middle of all of it, 40 strangers in booths and stools, staring like they'd been nailed to their seats. No help, no escape, just him. Ray tried to knee Bruce in the thigh, a cheap shot meant to collapse him. Bruce lifted his leg a fraction, letting the knee glance off, and in the same movement, he drove his elbow backward into Ray's stomach, not a cinematic elbow, A brutal, short impact. Ray's grip loosened. Bruce turned into the space Ray gave him and shoved Ray's head into the jukebox glass. The jukebox didn't break, but it groaned. The music stuttered again. The leader swung the chain. It came in low, aiming for Bruce's ribs. Bruce stepped in instead of back, closing distance before the chain could build speed. He caught the leader's forearm with one hand, and with the other, he struck. 2 quick hits, one to the bicep, one to the jawline. The leader's swing died mid-air. He stumbled, eyes wide, not from pain, from disbelief. Shaved Head grabbed a beer bottle off a table and smashed it on the edge, jagged glass flashing under neon. He came in with it high, trying to slash down toward Bruce's shoulder. Bruce's body moved first. His hand snapped out and clamped Shaved Head's wrist, not stopping the bottle by force, redirecting it. He guided the slash into empty air, then drove Shaved Head backward into a table. The table tipped, chairs scraped and fell. A woman yelped and jumped back. And that small sound, someone reacting, broke the room's paralysis. People started moving, scrambling, trying to get away without drawing attention. A man in a booth pulled his girlfriend down behind him. Someone dropped a drink and glass shattered, adding another sharp sound to the chaos. The prospects by the hallway stepped forward, eager now. Bruce saw them coming. Ray lunged again from behind and grabbed Bruce's waist, trying to lift him, trying to slam him to the floor. Bruce hooked his leg behind Ray's ankle and twisted. Ray lost his footing, and as he fell, Bruce guided him down, hard, into the floorboards. Ray hit with a thud that made the bar's walls feel thinner. The leader, panicking, raised the chain again and whipped it toward Bruce's face this time. The links flashed. Bruce ducked, the chain slicing air above his head, and in the same motion, Bruce stepped toward the jukebox, using the machine as cover. The chain slammed into the jukebox metal corner. A loud metallic crack, the song hiccuped, stuttered, and then the jukebox died. Not a fade, not a gentle stop. A sudden cut to silence, no music, no background noise to hide behind, only breathing, only boots shifting, only the faint buzz of neon and the terrified, involuntary sounds of a room trying not to become part of it. The silence hit the gang harder than any strike, because without the music, everyone could hear the leader's shaky inhale, could hear Ray groaning on the floor, could hear Mustache coughing like his ribs were on fire. The leader looked around, eyes darting, and realized for the first time that his control had been tied to noise, to distraction, to the feeling that the bar belonged to him because the bar was loud enough to swallow consequences. Now it wasn't swallowing anything. The leader swallowed instead. He tried to laugh, one sharp bark, but it came out wrong. "Jukebox broke," he said, like it was a joke. Nobody laughed. Bruce stood still beside the dead machine, chest rising and falling evenly. Face calm but colder now. The kind of calm that means the decision has already been made. One of the prospects shifted forward, trying to restore momentum, trying to be useful. He reached for Bruce's shoulder like Mustache had earlier. Bruce's hand shot up and caught the wrist. A quick twist. The prospect's knees buckled. He dropped with a sharp cry, clutching his own hand like it had betrayed him. That was when the leader finally understood the worst truth of the night. Bruce wasn't fighting them. He was managing them. And the more they came, the more he could choose how badly each one would be punished. The leader's eyes flicked to the waitress again. A new idea sparked, dirty and desperate. He backed toward her, chain still wrapped around his fist, and reached out as if to grab her as leverage. Bruce's head turned, not fast, just enough. And the leader stopped mid-reach because he saw something in Bruce's eyes that wasn't anger. It was permission. Permission for violence, permission for the night to end. The leader clenched his jaw, chain rattling softly in the silence, and said the next words like a man trying to pretend he still had options. "Don't come closer," he warned. Bruce took one step, and the dead jukebox, silent and dark, stood beside him like a witness. "Don't come closer," the leader warned, chain rasping softly as he lifted his fist. Bruce took another step anyway, slow, measured, because speed wasn't the point anymore. Control was. The silence made every sound feel like evidence. Boots shifting, a chair leg scraping, Ray's wet cough from the floor. The leader backed into the waitress and snagged her wrist, yanking her tight against his side like a shield. She cried out, breath-catching, eyes wide and glassy. "Stop!" the leader snapped, louder than he meant to be. His voice cracked just slightly. The room heard it. He felt them hear it, and that humiliation hit him harder than the ribs in the jaw had. Bruce's gaze moved to the waitress's wrist, red, trembling, then back to the leader's eyes. "Let her go," Bruce said. The leader barked a laugh that came out hollow. "Or what? You gonna be the hero?" He jerked the waitress forward an inch, just to show he could. The chain in his other hand lifted, hovering near her shoulder like an accidental disaster waiting to happen. The bartender flinched behind the counter as if his body wanted to throw itself in the way and couldn't. The prospects by the hallway shifted, unsure now. They weren't smiling anymore. They were watching their leader improvise desperation, and that's when loyalty starts to loosen. Bruce took one more step. The leader tightened his grip on the waitress. "I said don't." Bruce stopped. Not because of the threat, because stopping was part of the answer. He let the leader feel the weight of that pause. He let him drown in the silence he'd created. Then, Bruce said softly, "You're shaking." The leader's face flushed instantly. Rage surged up to cover the fact that it was true. He swung the chain, not at Bruce. At the floor beside Bruce's foot, crack, sending links snapping and rattling across wood. A warning, a tantrum, a show. "Last chance," the leader shouted. "You get on your knees again and you finish what you started. You lick it clean. You say you're grateful." "Or she," he yanked the waitress tighter. "She eats next." The waitress whimpered, trying not to sob too loud. Bruce's jaw set, one breath, controlled. Then he moved. It wasn't a rush. It was a cut, like a door slamming shut. Bruce stepped in on the leader's chain side, inside the arc before the weapon could build speed. His left hand shot out and pinned the leader's chain wrist against the jukebox frame, metal on metal, stopping the weapon with leverage, not strength. At the same time, Bruce's right hand snapped to the leader's forearm that held the waitress. A sharp twist. The leader's grip involuntarily opened. The waitress jerked free, stumbling backward, clutching her wrist, gasping like she'd been underwater. The room collectively inhaled. The leader tried to re-grab her. Bruce didn't allow a second attempt. He drove a short, brutal strike into the leader's collarbone, not a theatrical punch. A hammering hit that made the leader's shoulder dip and his arm numb instantly. The chain slipped. It clattered to the floor. That sound, metal links scattering in dead silence, was the loudest thing in the bar. The leader froze for a fraction of a second, staring down at his own weapon like it had betrayed him. Ray, still on the floor, tried to push himself up, wheezing. "Get him!" One of the prospects made a move, half-hearted, stepping forward as if obligation alone could fight. Bruce turned his head. Not his body. Just his head. The prospect stopped dead. The leader's eyes flicked around wildly, looking for his old advantage, noise, fear, a crowd that wouldn't intervene. But the crowd had changed. People weren't laughing, weren't pretending. They were watching with a strange clarity, like the spell had broken. The leader did the only thing men like him do when they sense the room leaving them. He lunged, bare hands now, no chain, just ego. He threw a wide right, heavy, ugly, aimed to smash Bruce's face and restore the hierarchy in one desperate swing. Bruce stepped offline an inch. The punch missed. Bruce caught the leader's arm at the wrist and elbow, turned it, and pulled the leader forward into the dead jukebox. The leader's shoulder hit first, then his cheek, then his forehead. A dull, final impact. The jukebox shuddered, dark, silent, taking the hit like a tombstone. The leader staggered back, eyes unfocused, trying to stay upright, trying to pretend it didn't hurt. Bruce didn't let him reset. Bruce swept the leader's leg with a short kick, nothing flashy, just enough to take his base away. The leader hit the floor hard, and the final humiliation wasn't the fall. It was what happened next. Bruce didn't keep hitting him. He stepped on the chain, pinned it, the same way the leader had pinned the chopsticks. Bruce looked down at him and said, quiet but clear enough for everyone to hear, "Now you understand." The leader tried to reach for the chain anyway, pure reflex, pure stubbornness. Bruce lifted his foot slightly, then set it back down, and the leader's fingers stopped an inch short. A pointless reach. A child reaching for something they no longer owned. Ray finally got to his knees, face slick with sweat, eyes wide with the realization that the night had flipped. Mustache sat hunched on a stool, holding his ribs, refusing to meet anyone's gaze. Shaved head stared at his broken pool cue on the floor like it was evidence against him. The prospects by the hallway didn't move. They didn't rush in. They didn't back their leader. They just watched him on the floor, disarmed, breathing hard, and in that moment their loyalty evaporated into self-preservation. The bartender straightened slowly behind the bar, blood still on his face, his hands shaking. Nobody cheered, nobody clapped. They were too stunned by the simplest thing. The music was gone, and with it, the gang's power. The leader swallowed and forced his mouth to work. You think you won?" he rasped, trying to find a last scrap of dignity. Bruce looked at him, then at the waitress rubbing her wrist, then at the bartender holding his head. "I didn't come to win," Bruce said. "I came to leave." He stepped off the chain, kicked it gently toward the leader like he was returning something dropped. Then Bruce walked, straight, calm, toward the door. Ray shifted as if to block him again. Bruce stopped and looked at Ray. Ray didn't step in front of him. Ray stepped aside. Bruce passed through the doorway as if it had been open the whole time. Outside, the highway wind hit his face, cold compared to the bar's heat. Behind him, the roadhouse stayed silent for a long beat, as if nobody wanted to be the first one to speak again. And inside, the dead jukebox sat dark against the wall, because the exact second the music died was the exact second the room stopped belonging to the bikers. If you want more stories like this, tight, escalating, and ruthless, hit like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments what city you're watching from.